Hi, my name is Eunice Travers. I'm 67, and until recently, I thought I was just helping my son's family get settled. They said, "Come live with us, you'll be part of everything." But days later, they had me cleaning bathrooms before guests arrived and calling me the help behind my back. They took my name off the house I helped pay for. They used my image in a corporate campaign without telling me. They erased me quietly, deliberately. Was it all just a misunderstanding, or was I never meant to be seen at all? The phone rang just as I was placing a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on my kitchen table. It was early, maybe a little after 8, and the Texas winter sun hadn't yet warmed the corners of my modest apartment. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked up. Warren's name flashed on the screen. My heart lifted. He didn't call often. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. "Hey, Mom," he said, a little breathless. "Do you have a few minutes for you always?" There was a pause. I could hear Vera and Lyle faintly in the background, her voice crisp, his high-pitched with morning excitement. "We've been thinking. The new place is huge. Too huge. Honestly. Lyle's been asking about you, and we figured maybe it's time." I sat down slowly, one hand still holding the towel. "Time to move in with us. You always said you wanted to help. Right, I mean. You'd have your own room, space to do your thing. But it'd be nice to have you around." My throat tightened. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to be wanted again. "I'd love that." I said, "Thank you." That's how it began, with an offer wrapped in warmth, too gentle to question. 2 days later, I boxed up my life in Caraville. My apartment had been my world since retirement. 2 rooms, sunlit windows, a creaky wooden chair I always meant to fix. Every corner held something of mine, quiet, familiar, safe. I folded blankets, wrapped glassware, and placed memories into cardboard, all while replaying Warren's words. I hadn't lived with anyone since he left for college. After Harold passed, it was just me. I found rhythm in solitude, but the thought of Lyle needing me, of being in a home with laughter and movement again, it stirred something old, something maternal. I packed my favorite photograph last Warren at age 4, holding a stick like a sword, grinning at the world like he could conquer anything. I wrapped it in one of my scarves and placed it carefully between towels. When the bus pulled out of Corville, I didn't look back. The trip to Houston was long, but I didn't mind. I watched fields turn to suburbs, then highways lined with billboards and convenience stores. I held my purse close, tucked under my coat. In it were all the important things: my IDs, some cash, a folded grocery list, and a small tin of mints I hadn't opened in months. When we arrived, I stepped off the bus and looked around the station. No one was there. I waited 10 minutes, then 15, pulling my coat tighter. I tried calling Warren, no answer. Vera didn't pick up either. Eventually, I called a cab and gave them the address Warren had emailed me. The driver was kind. He lifted my bags without comment. As we pulled up to the neighborhood, large homes with stone facades and hedges trimmed like sculptures, he whistled low. "Nice place," he said. I didn't respond. My stomach was knotted too tightly. Vera opened the door before I even reached the porch. She was dressed in a crisp blouse, makeup perfect, phone in one hand. "Oh, Eunice. You're early," she said with a tight smile. "We weren't expecting you until later." "I tried calling," I said, shifting the weight of my bag. "Oh, yes. Warren mentioned something. Come in." The house was beautiful, airy, and modern. Hardwood floors stretched into a pristine kitchen with quartz countertops. The air smelled faintly of lemon and some floral diffuser I couldn't place. Vera gestured toward a small guest room at the end of the hallway. "You can settle in here." There's a dresser, and we cleared a shelf in the closet." I thanked her and stepped inside. The room was small but neat white walls, beige bedding, no personal touches. I set my suitcase down and stood for a moment, letting the quiet settle. Dinner that night was hosted for a few of Vera's co-workers. The dining room table was long and gleaming, set with wine glasses and plates that probably cost more than my old car. As I approached, I noticed something odd. There was no seat for me. I looked around, thinking I'd missed it. But every chair was taken except for a narrow stool in the corner of the kitchen. Vera walked by and nodded at it. "Oh, perfect, you can sit there, if that's all right. We're a bit tight tonight." I carried my plate to the stool, balancing it on my lap. Halfway through dinner, one of the guests turned to me and smiled. "And how long have you been with the family?" "Excuse me," I asked. "You know, working here." I stared at her, the room spinning just slightly. No one corrected her. No one said a word. I smiled, lips trembling. "Not long," I replied. "Just getting started." Vera had invited a few of her co-workers over for lunch, a last-minute gathering. She said, "Just something casual for the girls from her PR firm." I offered to help. The moment I opened the fridge to reach for the salad greens, she appeared behind me. "Oh, don't worry about it, Mom," she said, gently nudging the fridge door closed with her hip. "Just stay out of the way." "Okay, you've done enough." She smiled as if she were thanking me, but it felt like being dismissed. So I sat at the edge of the kitchen island while she chopped and arranged and drizzled things I didn't recognize over things I used to make from scratch. I folded my hands in my lap and stayed quiet. The doorbell rang. In came 4 women dressed in smart neutrals and heels that never touched grass. Laughter bounced off the marble countertops. One of them glanced at me and asked, "Oh, is this the housekeeper you're lucky to have someone full-time?" I looked at her, startled. Before I could respond, Warren walked in and kissed Vera's cheek. No one corrected the woman. I smiled thinly and excused myself to the laundry room. Later that afternoon, I heard voices coming from Lyle's room. I was on my way to return a folded towel to the hall closet when I paused. Vera's voice was hushed but firm. "Lyle, honey, remember what we talked about? You call Grandma Isolde just Grandma, and we call my husband's mom Grandma H. Okay, we don't want to confuse people." There was a beat of silence. "But she lives here," Lyle said. "I know. Baby, but names are important. Now go wash up." I stepped back slowly before he saw me and returned to my room, the towel still in my hands. I sat down on the bed, ran my hand over the blanket, and stared at the window. A new label. I thought, not Grandma. Grandma H. As if I were a second-tier product on a store shelf. I didn't say anything that night, but something inside me curled tighter and refused to stretch back out. The fundraiser was held in a glass-walled event center, glittering with soft lighting and Vera's signature lavender and gold decor. I'd helped with setup that morning, folding napkins, filling centerpieces, organizing name cards. Vera had been too busy directing the caterers to notice I hadn't eaten. When the program began, I stood in the back near the exit, holding a glass of water. The MC's voice carried across the room. "We'd like to thank the person whose generous donation made this evening possible. Mrs. Isolde Mallory." Applause thundered. I didn't move. My heart pounded, but not from surprise. I had donated a portion of my retirement savings to help Vera launch this event. She had cried when I handed her the check, said it meant the world to her, said I was family. Isolde smiled graciously from the front table, not acknowledging me, not needing to. She knew no one would question it. I placed my empty glass on a side table and left before dessert. That night, Warren was in the living room watching something on his tablet when I stepped in. "Can I ask you something?" I said, keeping my voice low. He looked up. "Sure." "Mom, at the event tonight, why didn't they mention me I gave money too?" He blinked. "Vera thought it'd be cleaner for the branding. You know, to keep it tight. Isolde fits the image." I stared at him, unsure whether I was angrier at his words or the way he said them. So casual, so thoughtless. "You understand." "Right." I nodded. Not because I did, but because I had learned it was safer to pretend. The birthday invitation was printed on thick cream cardstock and hand-delivered to every guest except me. I learned about the dinner from Lyle, who excitedly told me, "Grandma Isolde's party is going to have 3 cakes." I smiled and nodded, already knowing my role, the quiet one behind the stove. Still, I offered to help. I baked 2 of Isolde's favorites, lemon pound cake and a quiche recipe she once called adequate. Vera accepted with a nod, barely glancing up from her phone. That evening, I wore my navy blue blouse, the one with the pearl buttons Warren had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. It was the first time I'd worn anything nice since arriving. The table was a long stretch of elegance. White candles, gold-trimmed plates, centerpieces of fresh lilies. I paused, scanning for my name among the place cards. It wasn't there. "Eunice," Vera called sweetly, "could you switch seats with Gloria, our caterer's assistant? She'll need to move between the kitchen and table." So I ate alone, on a stool in the kitchen, listening to polite laughter and the clink of silverware through the half-closed door. When the napkin I'd placed in my lap slipped to the floor, I reached for it and it was gone. One of the servers had scooped it up and tossed it without a word. After the toast, Vera unveiled a birthday banner hanging above the mantel. It was beautiful white cursive letters on lavender satin, reading, "To the most inspiring mother and mentor, Isolde Mallory." Beneath it was a quote, one I recognized immediately. I had said it to Vera years ago, during her first pitch meeting. Meltdown, grace doesn't mean quiet. It means knowing when to rise. There it was, printed in gold under Isolde's name. Guests smiled and nodded as Vera stood beside her mother, accepting compliments and posing for photos. I stood by the doorway, holding a tray of empty wine glasses. No one looked at me. No one asked who said those words first. I didn't correct them. After the guests left and the dishwasher hummed in the background, I helped Lyle get ready for bed. He curled against his pillow, his hair still damp from his bath. "Grandma Isolde said you weren't really part of the family," he whispered. I paused, the book open in my lap. "She did." He nodded, blinking sleepily. "But I think you are." I smoothed his blanket. "Thanks, sweetheart. That means a lot." I kissed his forehead and turned off the light. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, my hand pressed over my chest, trying to quiet the ache. Later that night, Warren was in his office. I knocked softly, stepping in with a cup of tea in hand. "Got a minute?" I asked. "Sure." "Mom." "What's up?" I hesitated. "Do you ever miss how things used to be just us?" He looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when I was enough. When I wasn't just someone you needed to make dinner or clean up after a party." He frowned. "Let's not make things harder than they are. Mom, you're here now. Let's just keep it peaceful." "Okay, don't stir things up." I nodded, setting the cup down and leaving without another word. But inside, something broke quietly and permanently. The kitchen smelled like toast and orange marmalade, sunlight spilling across the granite counters in soft gold. I was folding napkins near the sink when Vera glanced up from her tablet. "Can you make sure the guest bathroom is clean before Mom visits this weekend?" she asked, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. I paused. "You mean deep clean it?" She didn't look up. "Just make sure it's presentable. Hand towels, mirror, The usual. Across the table. Warren flipped a page of the newspaper, took a sip of his coffee, and said nothing. I turned back to the counter and kept folding, but my hands moved slower. It wasn't the request that cut. It was the tone. This wasn't help anymore. It was expectation. Routine. I was no longer being included. I was being managed. The rag in my hand sagged, heavy with dishwater and something else I couldn't name yet. Isolde arrived that Saturday like she owned the place. In a way, she did at least the space it carved around her. She kissed Lyle on the cheek, gave Vera an air kiss, and walked past me like I was the wallpaper. Lunch was roasted chicken, asparagus, and a quinoa salad I'd made from scratch. Vera had arranged the plates. Isolde took one look at the table and frowned. "The curtains are uneven," she said, pointing. "That side is lower." Warren looked up briefly, then returned to his phone. "Eunice, could you adjust those?" I hesitated. "Of course," I said. I set down my fork, stood up, and fixed the hem until it matched the other. When I returned to my seat, Isolde tapped her glass with a spoon. "Could I get a refill on my water?" "Dear, it wasn't rude. It wasn't even sharp. It was easy, expected." I took her glass, walked to the sink, and filled it. Something inside me hardened a little more. That evening, as I passed by the den on my way to put Lyle's clothes in the dryer, I heard voices. "I know she's not useless," Isolde was saying. "At least she cleans well." "She does," Vera replied, with a soft laugh. "She finally learned her place. Took some conditioning, but she's there." I stopped in my tracks. They hadn't seen me. I stood in the hallway, back straight, the laundry basket digging into my hip. "Besides," Vera continued, "she's more presentable now, and she doesn't talk much." They moved on to another topic, something about Vera's next campaign, but the words lingered. My place, my conditioning, presentable. I went back to my room and closed the door softly behind me. I didn't cry. I folded Lyle's socks with trembling hands, then sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the wall. The next morning, I woke before everyone. I boiled water, set the table, and made toast for Lyle's lunchbox. When Vera walked in, still tying her silk robe, she glanced at the clock. "Would you mind getting to the guest bathroom later? I think the mirror—" "No," I said. She stopped. "What, I'm not the housekeeper," I said simply, turning back to the sink. There was a silence. She adjusted her robe. "We're just trying to make things easier. Don't take it so personally." I didn't answer. Instead, I dried my hands on the towel, placed it neatly on the counter, and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. But something in me shifted that day. It was just a piece of paper, magneted to the fridge between Lyle's crayon drawing and a dry cleaning receipt. But there, it was a household chore chart, color-coded and printed on letterhead. Vera's name appeared beside grocery coordination. Warren was down for recycling and yard rotation. Lyle had a tiny checkbox for tidy room. And beneath all that, in bold type guest bathroom, Daily Eunice. I stood there for a long time, holding a damp coffee filter in one hand. I reached up, peeled the paper from the fridge, and grabbed an eraser from the drawer. The pink rubber squeaked faintly as I rubbed my name away. I put the chart back up. Warren walked past 20 minutes later. He opened the fridge, poured oat milk into his protein shaker, and never mentioned it. Later that afternoon, Vera came by, glanced at the chart, and without a word, rewrote my name in neat black pen. I said nothing, but my resolve, that hidden, steady core, began to harden. I was folding towels in the hallway linen closet when I heard them, Warren and Vera, chatting in the den just around the corner. Vera's voice, I was thinking. For the spring party. We'll keep Mom upstairs. Warren's sigh. Why, in case someone asks who she is? Remember at Isolde's party, someone thought she was housekeeping. I froze. She'll understand, Vera added, brushing it off like lint. We just want things to look polished. Warren didn't say a word. Not a laugh, not a protest, just silence. I didn't finish folding. I placed the towel back, closed the door gently, and walked to my room. My hands were shaking. That night, I didn't speak during dinner. It was almost midnight when I knocked on Warren's office door. He opened it. Surprised, a tablet in hand and headphones draped around his neck. Hey, Mom. Can't sleep. I stood there, gripping the door frame. If I'm so inconvenient, maybe I shouldn't be here. He blinked. What I swallowed hard. You've made it clear. Vera, too. I'm only useful when I'm invisible. He rubbed his forehead. This isn't what I meant. Then what do you mean? Warren Vera appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. We need to protect the atmosphere of the home. Mom, she said evenly, Lyle has a certain image of what family looks like. You complicate that sometimes. I turned to Warren. He looked exhausted, but he didn't refute her. I nodded, slowly, carefully. I see. And I did. The next morning, I packed. No one stopped me. Vera left a rideshare credit slip on the counter with the note. Use this easier than the bus. Warren hovered nearby, watching without speaking. He carried my second suitcase to the porch, but didn't offer to ride along. I hope you find peace. Mom, he said. Like it was a benediction, not a farewell. The car door shut with a soft click. The rain started just as we pulled away. I didn't look back. When I opened the door to my old apartment in Kerrville, the air felt different, thinner, like the place had exhaled and never inhaled again. Dust had settled in corners I used to clean with pride, and the couch cushions still bore the indentations of evenings I used to spend knitting, reading, thinking. It was all exactly the same. And yet, it wasn't. The kitchen table wobbled when I set my purse down. I stared at the single chair across from me, once occupied by friends, neighbors, or a younger Warren on college breaks. Today, it was just me. A robocall interrupted the silence. I ignored it. The next call was real, a woman's voice from the pharmacy. Mrs. Travers, we're calling because your card declined for the arthritis medication refill. Should we hold it another day? I blinked. That's not possible. I opened my laptop and logged into my account. It took longer than usual. When the numbers finally appeared, I froze. 2467. That's all I had left. I called the bank immediately. The phone pressed between my cheek and shoulder as I shuffled through old paperwork. The representative confirmed several recent transfers, large ones, all authorized under a power of attorney document signed last month. She said, I didn't sign anything. I whispered. She paused. Would you like us to email you a copy of the document for verification? Yes. Please. It arrived 20 minutes later. I opened the PDF and stared at the signature. It looked like mine. Almost. But there was something off about the curve of the E, the way the T was crossed. My hands trembled. I printed the page, grabbed a highlighter, and circled the date. Then I opened the folder with my old utility bills and letters I'd kept for years, samples of my actual signature. I lined them up, side by side. This was not mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out an old flash drive and loaded my scanned house documents. Back then, when Warren was buying the property, I had co-signed to help with the down payment and get better mortgage terms. It was all in my name, partially, or so I'd thought. I logged into the county clerk's database and searched the address. What I found hit harder than the phone call or the signature. The property was now listed under an LLC Mallory Holdings. The managing member, Isolde Mallory. There was also a lien on the home secured against a private loan just 3 weeks ago. I printed the entire file, the titles, the transfers, the lien filings. My name wasn't on any of it. I had helped them buy that house. It had been my backup plan, my investment in Warren's future, and mine. Now it was just another asset in someone else's portfolio. A week later, I walked to the neighborhood mail center to ask about a letter I hadn't received. The clerk scanned my ID, then frowned. Says here your mailbox was reassigned. What? There was a request logged box rekeyed and redirected to a forwarding address in Houston. About 3 weeks ago. Who made the request? He shrugged. Says it came from the listed primary resident. I stood there, unsure what to say. The clerk offered to help me file a new request, but I declined. I walked home slowly, 1 foot in front of the other. Every step felt like moving through wet cement. My mailbox, my name, my house, my signature. All of it taken without a word. The invitation arrived in an envelope that smelled faintly of citrus and printer ink. It was thick cardstock gold trim, embossed letters. Women of Influence, a celebration of strength and legacy, hosted by Vera's firm. My name was handwritten in the corner, just Eunice. No last name. No title. I hadn't expected to be remembered. Curiosity nudged me into attending. I dressed carefully, choosing the gray sweater with the pearl buttons and the scarf Vera once complimented before she stopped seeing me entirely. I sat in the back row of the event hall, away from the spotlights. The lights dimmed. A promotional video began playing images of women hugging children, leading teams, opening businesses. Then came a clip of someone scrubbing a bathroom sink. Me. It was me. There I was, on Vera's screen, in the house I'd helped them buy, in the sweater I thought no one noticed, wiping down the guest bathroom in silence. The caption read, "True family is built on service and humility." Laughter rippled across the room. They didn't know it was me, but I knew. They presented the award after the video. Isolde stepped onto the stage, draped in lavender, smiling like a queen. Vera stood beside her and adjusted the mic. "My mother," she began, "has always modeled strength and grace. Everything I am, I owe to her." I closed my eyes. I had said those exact words to Vera once after her first failed pitch when she doubted herself. I had said, "You're strong and graceful, and whatever you become, I'll know it came from the best parts of me." Now it was Isolde's legacy. I looked around. No one even turned toward the back of the room. I left early, stepping into the cold air just as a catering van pulled up near the side exit. A young woman. Paige. I think her name was called out as she recognized me. "Mrs. Travers. I can give you a ride if you're heading near Kerrville." She used to live in my building, nice girl, worked odd jobs. I nodded and climbed in. The car smelled of vanilla and fried appetizers. Halfway into the drive, she glanced at me. "Did you see that clip of the cleaning lady in the promo? That was staged." "Right," I looked at her, pulse loud in my ears. "Of course," I said, "staged." She laughed. It was kind of powerful, honestly. I smiled, but inside, something burned. Back home. I pulled out the old black binder Vera had forgotten about. It held printouts of her earliest pitch decks, brand concepts, email threads scrawled with my handwriting, notes in the margins. "Change this color palette, too cold." Led with family story here. Tagline feels hollow. Try something tied to memory. I flipped to a page from her first campaign. At the top, grace isn't silence. It's choosing your moment to speak. I'd written that in red ink. She'd underlined it in blue. Tonight, she'd said the opposite. Grace was silence, according to the narrative now. Humility was service. Service was someone scrubbing grout while her face blurred in a PR video. I closed the binder slowly. I had once been her foundation. Now I was just a prop. The email arrived in a flurry of inbox noise I almost ignored. It was from Vera's firm, an Evite to Warren's promotion dinner, dressed in corporate blue and silver fonts. No personal note, just the formal script. We look forward to celebrating with you. I stared at the screen for a long time. It had to be a courtesy copy. I wasn't meant to attend, so I RSVP'd yes. I spent the next day printing documents, my old account statements, the forged power of attorney, the property records showing my name vanished and Isolde's entity in its place. I organized them into a folder with clear tabs. Then I chose my outfit. Not something to fade in. A deep emerald blouse with sharp shoulders, slacks that didn't wrinkle, earrings I hadn't worn since Harold's funeral. I painted my lips not red, but something close. That night, I was no longer background. That night, I came to be seen. Applause echoed as I slipped into the back of the venue. Tables shimmered with candles and crystal, and Warren stood under a spotlight, smiling, shaking hands. Vera took the mic. Tonight, we honor not just a promotion, but the values that got us here. Strength, integrity, family. Her voice warmed as she turned to Isolde. My mother has always led by example. Her grace, her generosity, this home, this life was built on her foundation. I stood still, a guest at my own son's celebration, invisible and unnamed. When the host called for group photos, I stepped forward. A hush fell. Fork stopped midair. I approached the front with the quiet of a tide rolling in. Before you take pictures, I have something to say. I opened the folder and laid the pages on the table, a deed with my name scratched out, a bank statement with unauthorized transfers, the scanned power of attorney bearing a signature not mine. This house, I said, voice steady, was bought with my help. The funds mine, the trust mine. What you see tonight wasn't built on grace. It was built on quiet theft. Guests shifted in their seats. A few leaned forward. Others looked away. Warren's face drained of color. Vera stepped forward, jaw tight. This isn't the time, Mom. I didn't blink. You made it the time the day you erased me. Vera's voice sharpened. You're jealous. You've always been bitter when someone else got credit. I turned to her. You took my words, my image, and now you've taken my name. Isolde stayed seated, silent, folding her napkin slowly as if the folds could protect her from this unraveling. Warren raised a hand. Let's all take a moment. No, I said. I looked directly at him. You handed them my house. You took my name off a mailbox I paid for. You watched as they turned me into a footnote. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I turned, walked past the stunned faces, past the glasses catching candlelight. No one moved to stop me. But this time, they all watched me go, not because I was scenery, because I'd broken the frame. The morning light slid across my kitchen floor in Kerrville, like it always had, slow and golden, touching every chipped tile with soft forgiveness. I sat at the table with a mug of black coffee, watching steam curl upward, when the silence broke. My phone buzzed again. 28 missed calls, 11 unread messages. Warren, Vera. Even Lyle's school had sent something vague and official. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I tied my cardigan and stepped outside to tend the rosemary. The air still held a trace of frost, but the soil was beginning to wake. I knelt down. the earth cold through my knees, and ran my fingers across the leaves. "Eunice," my neighbor called gently over the fence. I saw the news." Was that really your son they were talking about? I stood slowly. Yes, that was Warren. She didn't pry, just nodded, eyes soft with a sympathy I didn't need. I watered in silence, one small task after another, until the ground no longer looked thirsty. By noon, the unraveling had begun. Vera's firm had scrubbed their website of every campaign titled Family First. Their Instagram archive shrank overnight. The promotional video, the one with me cleaning, vanished without a trace. On LinkedIn, Warren's status changed quietly, on extended leave to address personal matters. Then came a letter in the mail, stamped in legal red. The home I had once co-signed, the one Vera now claimed as part of their empire, was under investigation for misrepresentation of ownership. A lien freeze had been placed. There would be hearings. I read it twice, folded it neatly, placed it in the same binder that once held my grocery lists and Lyle's finger paintings, and I smiled. 2 days later, I walked into the same bank that had once questioned my signature and froze the account Warren used to manage our finances. This time, I didn't come alone. Beside me stood Carla Denson, an attorney my friend Lisa had recommended. Calm, steady, precise. We sat across from the branch manager, who adjusted his glasses as I handed over documents, bank transfers, notarized letters, a revoked power of attorney. He nodded through each page. "We've already flagged irregularities. Your son's access has been removed." He paused, then said, almost as if confessing, "We always wondered about those withdrawals, but, well, family's complicated." I looked at him, my voice quiet but sure. Not anymore. That evening, a letter arrived, handwritten, 4 pages. Warren. It began with apologies about the dinner, the signature, the house. It moved into explanations, pressure from Vera, confusion, fear of conflict. Then, near the end, "You're still my mom. We can fix this." I read it once, then folded it and slid it into the drawer beside my bed. Outside. The rosemary waved gently in the wind. I stepped out and watered it again, this time without gloves, letting the cold remind me of where I was, where I had always been, rooted. The envelope was thick, creamy white, and addressed in Vera's handwriting, too deliberate to be casual, too careful to be warm. I opened it by the garden, where the rosemary was just beginning to bloom again. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, front and back. If you had said how you felt sooner, it read, maybe none of this would have happened. She went on, pairing soft regret with sharp implication. My silence, apparently, had been the true villain. I read it once. Then I walked to the compost pile behind the shed, lifted the lid, and placed the folded paper inside. Let time rot it down with the orange peels and dead basil. Not all things deserved storage. 2 days later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail until I heard his voice. "Grandma? It's me? Lyle?" I'm using Michael's phone. "Mom doesn't want me to talk to you." My chest tightened. "I miss your bedtime stories," he said. I swallowed the ache. "I miss yours too, sweetheart." He was quiet. Then, "Can we write like a secret?" We agreed on the mailbox behind the church library. Every Tuesday, I'd leave a book wrapped in brown paper with a note tucked inside. Something for him, something from me. Something not erased. That Friday, Carla, my attorney, called. Her tone was clinical but tinged with something like awe. "The IRS audit is expanding. Isolde's estate flagged for suspicious income. The mortgage transfers triggered alerts. And Warren, He's listed on every liability form. I said nothing. She paused. Eunice, I know this isn't the outcome you wanted. No, I replied. But it's the one they earned. Then I hung up, went to the sink, and washed dishes in silence. Not in servitude, not in submission, but in reflection. The following week, I stood before a room of women at the Kerrville Library. Folding chairs squeaked as they settled in, notebooks opened, pens clicked. Our topic was simple financial literacy after 50. I'd volunteered after being asked by the librarian who once shared my garden herbs in summer. My name is Eunice Travers, I began. I was removed from my home, my accounts, even my mailbox. And I stayed quiet, thinking I was protecting what was left. A murmur ran through the room, but silence doesn't protect. It delays collapse. I showed them copies of real documents redacted, but real. Transfers I never approved. Loans in someone else's name. It's never too late to read the fine print, or to walk away. They nodded. Some cried. Afterward, a woman no younger than me pulled me into a hug. You said everything I was afraid to admit out loud, and for the first time, I felt seen. Not as the shadow behind a sun, not as the woman in the back row, but as myself. There was a knock at the door I didn't expect, not the rhythmic tap of a neighbor or the clumsy thud of a package delivery, but gentle, hesitant. I opened it, and there he stood. Warren. He was holding a pie. Blueberry, from the look of it. His tie was crooked, and his eyes carried a weariness that didn't match his age. Can I sit for a while? He asked. I nodded. We walked to the porch, side by side like strangers sharing a sidewalk. We sat in silence. The pie rested between us on the bench, untouched. Bees hovered in the garden. Somewhere, a sprinkler clicked into motion. I counted the seconds between his glances and mine. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin. I'm sorry, he said, for everything, for not seeing it. I didn't speak. He looked at his hands. I thought I was doing what made sense, protecting peace in the house, keeping everything stable. I turned to him. Why didn't you ask me if I was okay? He looked up, and for the first time, I saw it not just shame, but something else. Fear. I guess. He whispered. I didn't want to know. We sat again in silence. Sometimes, the loudest thing someone can say is what they don't. A few days later, a package arrived. No return address, but I recognized the printed labels from Vera's firm. Inside were old family photographs. Me holding Warren in the backyard of our first house, his high school graduation, his wedding day, though my face was cropped at the edge. There was a typed letter. I can't undo what I did, but you deserve your place back in these memories. I flipped through the stacks slowly. She had captioned each one as if hoping names could rewrite history. One caught me, Warren, age 6, clutching my hand at a pumpkin patch. The caption read, "With Auntie." I stared at it for a long time. Then, without anger, I placed it at the bottom of the pile. That version of the past wasn't mine to carry. That evening, I pulled out a different photo, one no one had sent me. Lyle and I, flour on our noses, baking cookies 2 Christmases ago. His little fingers were pressing chocolate chips into dough, my hand steadying his. I framed it and placed it near the window where the afternoon light lands. Some memories don't need correcting. They just need truth. Outside, the rosemary swayed in the wind. I breathed in its sharp, clean scent and thought, maybe silence wasn't about hiding. Maybe, sometimes, silence is how we keep what's sacred from being twisted. And sometimes it's how we remember who we were before someone else tried to edit the story. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish, familiar in a way I hadn't realized I remembered. I walked alongside Carla, my attorney, who carried a thin leather folio and an expression that said she'd done this before. For her, this was a filing. For me, it was a declaration. We approached the clerk's desk. Carla handled the introductions. I signed my name on 3 different documents. One returned partial legal claim to the house. Another formally removed Warren and Isolde as authorized agents on any of my accounts. The third, a civil suit, charged them with unauthorized asset transfer and financial abuse of a dependent elder. I didn't tremble, not even once. Outside, I took a deep breath. The Texas sky stretched wide above me, blue, still, and unbothered. "I'm proud of you," Carla said. But I wasn't proud. Not yet. I was simply reclaiming. That evening, I sat cross-legged on my couch as a local news anchor read my name aloud on television. Eunice Travers, 67 of Kerrville, filed a civil suit this morning against her son and prominent socialite Isolde Mallory, citing financial exploitation and property fraud. They showed B-roll footage, my garden, the porch, the rosemary waving behind me. My name was spelled right. My story told plainly. Not twisted, not filtered through someone else's lens. My hands rested on the arms of my chair as the segment ended, and I smiled. Not because they believed me, but because this time, I didn't need them to. 2 days later, I set up 2 folding chairs in the garden, just in case. One for Warren, one for Lyle. I watered the mint and trimmed the hydrangeas. I made lemon tea and set out shortbread on a plate with a cloth napkin. Then I waited and waited. No one came. At dusk, I brought the tea inside and sat with an old picture book one Lyle had once taken home during a sleepover years ago. Between the pages, tucked inside a rip where the spine had come loose, was a folded sheet of lined paper, crayon handwriting, jagged but certain. I miss your hugs. When I'm big, I'll find you again. I pressed the paper to my heart. I didn't need an apology. That letter was enough. By April's end, I stood at a podium in the local community center. Dozens of women, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and kind, sat facing me. The topic, financial self-defense for women over 60. I told them about power of attorney, about quiet coercion, about how silence often looks like peace, but is actually permission. It's not selfish to protect your dignity, I said. And if you've been taught that silence is grace, remember this silence can also be erasure. A woman in the front row nodded, tears brimming. Another stood and began to clap. Soon, the whole room followed. I didn't cry. I simply stood there and took it in the sound of women choosing each other, choosing themselves. As I stepped off the stage, someone handed me a note. It read, "You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost." That night, in the garden, I sat in the last of the light. My hands smelled of rosemary. A wind chime whispered above the fence. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt written, in ink that wouldn't fade. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that dignity isn't something someone else can hand you. It's something you have to take back for yourself. For too long, I stayed silent because I believed it was the kind thing to do, the graceful thing. But silence allowed others to rewrite my name, my worth, and my history. To anyone out there watching who feels invisible, I hope my story reminds you it's never too late to speak up, to protect what's yours, and to rebuild yourself from the ground you once watered for everyone else. What would you do if your family tried to erase you? Have you ever felt like your love was used against you? Let's talk about it. Share your story in the comments. If this video touched something in you, drop a 1 or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't resonate, tell me why your voice matters here. And if you want more stories that hold truth, pain, strength, and healing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your journey matters. Let's walk it together.